sure we are live, and then we will start the show. How's everybody doing? I assume I am live. I'm just going to briefly check that the stream is good. Looks like we are live. All right, awesome. Okay, so today's stream is going to be about energy optimization for busy entrepreneurs and executives in the context of diet, sleep, and stimulants, mainly caffeine. So what I'm going to be talking about today is I'm going to cover each of those areas. Be good if I had the mic by my face. So the stream is going to be for busy entrepreneurs and executives, optimizing your energy by way of diet, sleep, and stimulants, mainly caffeine. And I'm going to cover each of those areas and go over some basic science and let you know why maybe some of the things you might be applying in those areas may not be exactly optimal, and what you can do instead to improve the quality of your energy levels and consistency of your energy levels by way of optimizing your diet, what you eat, when you eat it, your sleep, how you're going to sleep, your sleep environment, that'll improve things like sleep latency and sleep quality. And lastly, how to optimize your stimulant or caffeine intake for optimal energy levels on a regular basis. So going to be covering all of that today. Let's get into it. I'm pretty excited. It is a very broad spectrum of topic, but I'm going to give you guys some broad strokes, some pointers, a little bit of science, and then I'll be doing separate streams on each of these topics. That way you can get an even deeper understanding. But for now, we're just going to cover how you can improve these things, why it's important. And so let's go ahead and get into it today on Rise Above Health. Very exciting. All right. So I'm going to do what I did last time and just go ahead and let me just kill the music here. I don't even know if you guys can hear it, but let me just go ahead and bring up my notes. And I'm going to share my screen here. Just 1 second. I'm probably going to switch the format over to a PowerPoint setup in the near future, but I'm working out of Evernote for now. So forgive me if the font or what have you isn't quite large enough. Looks like it should be okay. If somebody can leave a comment and just let me know if they can see the text, that would be awesome. If not, no worries. I'm going to read it out for you. So, all right. So let's start with just general notes. So busy entrepreneurs, high performers, they need to rely on consistently high energy levels to produce week in and week out, day in and day out, minute to minute, hour to hour, so on and so forth. So without that, you cannot perform consistently and at high levels, which you absolutely need if you're going to make and retain gains in your business or areas of interest, your work. If you have, let's say, a high-paying, high-stress job, so on and so forth, you need to be performing on the daily, right? So, and there are several health factors that lean into this, which I've already covered. And you can optimize these areas of diet, sleep, and caffeine-based stimulants or other types of similar stimulants. They usually all involve caffeine. That's what most people are using. A lot of coffee addicts in the workplace, in the entrepreneur space. So there's that to take into consideration now. There's a lot of things that you can fix right now to get even more energy levels and an easy 10 to 15% increase in productivity. So I'm going to start off with just the basic notes, and then we'll jump into each section. Excuse me. All right. So for basics, diet and sleep compose the core of energy modulation. Now, what do I mean by that? Diet and sleep are the two primary things that everybody does every day that has the largest impact in how you feel moment to moment and day to day. So if you're eating the wrong things or not eating the right things at the right times, your energy levels are going to flag and peak and spike and crash and all of these things. And there's a lot of, let's say, specifics that go into it that most people either aren't aware of or never heard about. And I think that's kind of a fault of our education system. And also, most people are just genuinely busy and don't necessarily have time for the kind to learn the kinds of things that I'm going to be talking about. So that's why I've dedicated this segment, and it's time for you guys to kind of get an action-packed little portion of detail, some content around that. So we're going to make it nice and compact. Additionally, entrepreneurs, love to use stimulants, caffeine in particular, but maybe also some other ones. And they use that as a frequent crutch, and they're using it to try and retain those peak energy levels. But they often fall short and end up abusing them with generally reduced effects. So I'm going to cover that. I'm going to cover how to optimize each of those three areas. That's diet, sleep, and stimulants for steady and even energy throughout the day from morning till night. So let's start off with the diet area. So diet, very important subject. And with diet, again, it's about what you're eating and when you're eating it and with what. So main thing, timing and content of food. So typically the number one thing I want to talk about, and the one thing we want to look at the most, is carbohydrates and sugar. So carbohydrates and sugar, sugar are a kind of carbohydrate, but the one thing that carbs and sugar do specifically is they actually spike your blood glucose. Now, blood glucose is a key indicator of, let's say, energy content that's flowing through your veins, and the body's going to use it for all different kinds of energy synthesis, namely, let's say, production of ATP through something called glycolysis. Not to get too complicated, but basically your cells are going to take that glucose and turn it into energy. What it's also going to do is your body has to release something called insulin to shuttle that glucose around. And it's going to go, it'll be used firstly for energy. Then your muscles are going to store it in the form of something called glycogen, also gets stored in the liver. And then finally, it's going to end up as getting stored as fat for later. Your body definitely likes to snack, it likes leftovers. So it's going to try and store as much of that excess glucose as it can. It's going to convert it into something called triglycerides, and then they're going to get crammed into fat cells. Those fat cells get nice and big, and then your midsection is going to grow. But what's more important than that is actually the kind of carbohydrates you're eating and when you're eating them, and then also the fat and protein content of your diet. Those are going to make a big difference for your energy levels as well. So high levels of carbs and sugars, there's a bit of a misconception there, because I know it seems like a good idea to start the day or in general for quick energy, right? But since you process those, let's say, what are called high glycemic carbs, those quick energy sources, you process those actually very quickly. The body breaks them down very quickly, and you actually end up experiencing an energy crash afterwards. So high glycemic foods, as they're called, they're generally based on simple carbs, simple sugars. They cause energy crashes, and those high glycemic foods have simple sugars, right? So simple sugars break down very quickly. They provide a rush of energy, but the body has to do something with that energy, right? So it gets quickly assimilated and used, and then honestly, it's going to end up probably getting stored as fat, particularly if it's, let's say, simple carbs, things like sugary cereals, fruit on an empty stomach. If you're not already replete of glucose, and let's say any other kind of quick hits like that, right? So it's going to get used and then stored as fat. So it's a bit like, let's look at like simple carbohydrates and sugars. So cereals, things like yogurts with sugar in them that are not particularly high protein, Pop-Tarts, whatever else like that, you name it, right? So it's a bit like actually filling your car, the gas tank of your car, with NOS instead of gasoline. NOS is something that people like. Well, let's say car and racing enthusiasts are familiar with. You want to inject it somehow, I don't know, somehow into your tank at certain times to get a boost of speed, right? But it's a bit like filling your let's say it's like filling your car with jet fuel, essentially. So so foods that do this: sugary cereals, fruits, yogurts with lots of sugar, white pastas, table sugars, syrups, honey to a lesser degree. Honey's a bit more of a complex carbohydrate, but still very high in sugar. Anything else sweet that you like to put on breakfast foods, and then like sweet breakfasty type foods themselves. So I do actually have a graph to demonstrate this, an example of blood sugar going up and down, along with insulin release and storage, which is the hormone that shuttles the glucose um, around your meals. So check out this graph I found just from a quick Google search. I do have references for most of this stuff, but this one I grabbed off Google. I don't have a link for it. Anyway, so let's see. So you can see this graph right here. It's going to indicate this is glucose, blood glucose levels, along with insulin release by the pancreas at regular intervals around meals. So you can see here at the bottom, you have, I'm going to try and zoom in as much as I can. You have breakfast here. You got the first crest, lunch, the second crest around 1 o'clock, and then dinner looks like in this case around 5, 6, 7 o'clock. So again, this is documenting glucose levels, which is the release of and the breakdown of those sugars from whatever carbohydrates you're eating, pastas, breads, potatoes, cereals, you name it, along with reactions to, protein and fats. They do that as well, but to a lesser extent. So just for a visual, you can kind of see how your blood sugar is going to go up and down throughout the day around your meals. Now, these are pretty steep spikes. I would say in general, you want kind of more like let's say a crest of a wave. You want it to go like that instead of like this, like slopes. But so you can see here, this is kind of a reading of blood glucose right throughout the day. So, and actually there's a portion here. It says starch-rich food. So starchy things like pastas, white breads, potatoes. That's the solid line. So you can see the what's happening there. And then let's see, the dotted lines is actually sucrose, which is kind of like your traditional sugar, right? So you can see if you look at this person for lunch, there's a comparison here. I don't know if it's one person, a group of people, but the comparison around lunchtime looks like one consumed primarily starchy foods, so those potatoes and pastas or whatever, and another person, let's say, had sucrose, so sucrose-rich food, sugary things. So maybe just imagine this person had like a Pop-Tart or like a quick energy bar with lots of sugar. I've seen those like sort of let's say energy bars nowadays. They have like lots of sugar in them, right? So you can take a look at the back. You'll see it has like 10, 20 grams of sugar, things like that. So this person had something very sugary. So actually you can see there's a much higher peak in blood glucose from that sucrose-rich food. So what I was saying to you guys before about energy levels and peaks and crashes, right? If you're eating, let's say, sugar-dense food, sucrose, fructose, whatever it is, you're going to get this much more elevated peak and crash. You follow that dotted line, the dotted line here. There's a much higher peak, but also a much bigger crash, a much bigger trough in that person's glucose and insulin levels. Now, this is actually really bad for your overall energy levels because it's going to lead to a similar sensation, right? You're going to get, you think about kids, this is your traditional sugar crash right here. That's actually what's going on. So you get a nice big sugar peak and then crash. You feel great up here, full of energy. And then if you guys can see my mouse, and then down here in the trough, you're going to feel tired, lethargic, etc., you name it. Versus a more starchy food, maybe, there's a bit more fiber in there. The carbs are what you would consider complex carbs in this case, at least compared to this very sugar-rich food, simple carbohydrates. The complex carbs, the solid lines, a much lower peak, and then a much more sustained blood glucose level and insulin response. Now, that's ideal because you're going to get that much more, let's say, maintained energy level. It's going to be much more like a line or a slight crest and, return than that, let's say, very high peak and then trough. So The person with the solid lines actually has much more consistent energy levels, and or maybe there's a comparison here, but so the solid lines looks much better here, and you can actually see, particularly between lunch and dinner, there is a much more sustained blood glucose level, sustained insulin response, and then picks back up nicely when they have dinner, and then kind of tapers off again in a very kind of smooth way. So that's a demonstration of the difference between, let's say, complex and simple carbohydrates and how they're processed by the body, and how that impacts your energy levels. So just a by the by. So that's a nice demonstration there. So regular ingestion of those high glycemic foods, those simple sugars, again, think Pop Tarts, sugary cereals, sugary yogurts, etc. They're associated with this kind of activity here is associated with weight gain, and actually eventually diabetes, and those energy spikes and crashes I was talking about. So you definitely want to avoid having sugary things by themselves. And I'm going to talk about how you can actually cut this, what this is called actually glycemic load, to help improve your energy levels. So you get something that's more like these solid lines and less like this dotted one. So to get more even energy throughout the day, you want to start with those complex carbs. So that would be, I've actually got a list, but things that are more like like whole wheat or brown rice. I'm trying to think of other ones. I mean, there's carbs in vegetables. Those are complex carbs as well. But basically, you want to stay away from the really sugary stuff that breaks down quickly. To cut this, complex carbs and add fats or proteins or both. So what that does is it cuts the glycemic load. Instead of getting this, you're going to get actually this, which is really what you want for sustained energy. And you can check this out. This graph right here, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So if you have a high glycemic index meal, you're going to get, again, that really high peak and then kind of a crash, versus, let's say you have brown rice or a whole wheat toast or whatever it is if you're doing breakfast. With your whole wheat toast, let's say it's breakfast, right? Whole wheat toast, you want to add maybe some egg whites or whole eggs or smoked salmon or like lean chicken breast or something, right? And then maybe some fats. Avocado is a healthy one. Monounsaturated in that case. Adding the protein and or fat in with the carbohydrates is actually going to yield you that nice even energy level until it's time for your next meal. So you see the gray, we want to avoid that. The green is what we want. So, and that looks, you can actually see the difference. I'm going to zoom in again here. See the difference in the glycemic load in terms of blood glucose of carbohydrates versus fats and proteins. The carbs is this big tall line here. And then we have protein, provides the longest, well, actually, no, it provides a more pronounced peak, but than fat, but much less pronounced than carbs and sugar. So you can cut down this big tall line here, that's the carbs, by adding in fats and sugar. The line will average out somewhere in the middle. You get a nice even stream. And you can see actually there's a time, the x-axis is time. So carbs, you peak and then crash in about 4 hours. Protein, it's going to kind of list up till about 4 hours and then come down at the 5th hour. And then fats provides actually pretty sustained energy for about 6 hours. So cutting glycemic load, add fats and proteins to your meals, and then you'll get kind of a nice curve. Actually, so here's some example in case there's any confusion about what complex carbs are, and give some real world examples, right, to help you achieve this, and get us away from the sugary breakfasts and foods and things like that for quick energy. Excuse me, guys. I'm very excited and gassy. So, so complex carbs, right? So from I think I have two things here. Okay, so let's start with from harvard.edu. Here's some examples of high glycemic carbs, and then things you can swap them for, which have a lower glycemic index, which will lead to a better, healthier metabolic response, lower blood glucose overall, and more insulin sensitivity. So white rice, high glycemic index, right? Instead of white rice, try brown rice. Instant oatmeal, instead of that, try steel cut oats. Corn flakes, instead of that, try bran flakes. I know they don't taste quite as good, but corn flakes don't taste great either, in my opinion. So baked potato, swap that out for whole wheat pasta or brown rice. It did say pasta here, but I crossed that out because like let's say white pastas, they are still in the medium to high side of the glycemic index. So at least a whole wheat pasta or something that's like vegetable based pastas, pea protein pastas. There's a ton of shit out there nowadays that's like that. So white bread, you got to swap it out for whole wheat or whole grain bread. It's going to bring down that glycemic load. Honestly, like Wonder Bread, that stuff is candy. You really, really have to watch it with that stuff. And I know maybe you love white bread, but you have to consider swapping over to a whole wheat option if you're going to eat wheat products. So finally, corn. Actually, people may not know that corn is actually quite high in sugars. So particularly if it's been processed and comes in a can, especially then it's going to be very high glycemic. So swap out corn for peas or leafy greens instead. So just to give you guys a concept of that sort of high glycemic versus low glycemic carbs, those are some examples. So brown rice, steel cut oats, bran flakes, brown rice, whole grain breads, peas or leafy greens. Pretty much anything that's pretty much anything that doesn't either have a ton of sugar or isn't like let's say a whitish color. So additionally, for further look in on this, actually I have something from, I guess it's from Oregon State .edu. What is this website actually? Let's go check this really quick. Oregon State University. Oh, the Linus Pauling Institute. Okay, gotcha. So the Linus Pauling Institute is an institute that is dedicated to studying like longevity and I had a note in here on it, but basically the Linus Pauling Institute is about longevity, right? So you can check out this list here by going to OregonState.edu, and you look at the foods here. They have a glucose rating generally of 100 to 0, 100 being the most glycemic, high glycemic, and 0 being the lowest. So at the top, you've got your russet potato, your white potato, puffed rice cakes, corn flakes, jelly beans, donuts, watermelons, soda crackers, bread, white flour bread, pancakes. And then on the lower end, you actually have things like peanuts, cashews, barley, kidney beans, lentils, carrots, etc. So you can kind of get a sense of they all have carbs, but there's a big variation in terms of what those carbs are actually doing when they hit your bloodstream. So again, that's from the Linus Pauling Institute, and you guys can check that out. Covered that. So to recap, and hope I'm not going into too much detail, but it's really important you guys understand how what you eat affects your energy levels. Complex carbs, add proteins and or fats. That's point number one. Point number two, don't eat simple sugars by themselves, meaning without fat or protein, unless you are right about to work out or just finished working out. In that case, it's a bit better because your body can actually utilize that free floating glucose for exercise. Your muscles, and I'll try not to go too much into the science, but your muscles can use it, and you're going to be much more depleted of energy during and after your workout. So in that case, it's okay. And then after the workout, you can help replenish the glycogen in your muscles. So it's a bit better then. There are more hacks you can do to help optimize your glucose and insulin and glycogen, but I'm going to cover those in another stream. So These tips alone will give you a great advantage and help blunt any energy peaks and crashes you may be currently experiencing. And there are much more tips, of course, but these are the really big ones with regard to diet and to help optimize your energy levels. Okay, so that was diet. Next, we're going to cover sleep. So the effects of sleep on energy levels. I changed the banner here because I'm fancy like that. Let me see. Okay, that's good too. All right, so sleep, the effects of sleep on energy levels. So sleep is very simple. It's quality plus duration equals good energy and steady energy, right? So most people understand that more sleep is better, but often don't make time for it. And if you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, an executive, you definitely understand that. Hey, sleep is great, but I'm busy and I have shit to do, so I don't necessarily have all the time in the world to sleep or as much time as I'd like. So there's a theory of sleep called the restorative theory of sleep. And the theory basically goes your cells, which are responsible for the production of all the energy you ever experience, undergo repair or autophagy, and also during sleep duplicate or mitosis to create new cells. So this is backed by findings. Many functions in the body are assisted during sleep by way of muscle repair, tissue growth, protein synthesis, and also the release of many hormones for growth, which occur primarily during sleep. Also, sleep has been found to play an important role in maintaining body weight. So, two very important factors there. So, like I said, sleep duration, sleep quality. Those are the two main factors with regard to sleep and optimizing your energy levels. You want quality sleep and you want it to last for a long time. So, when I'm talking about 7 to 9 hours. So, here's how to optimize that, starting with duration. So, number one, design your schedule to accommodate sleep. So that means planning for and understanding. Most people actually need 7 to 9 hours of sleep for optimal energy. Now, there are some rare exceptions. Some people can do well with 6 hours, 5 hours, maybe even 4 hours. There are some rare individuals with basically a genetic mutation at a gene called DEC2, DEC2, that enable them to live healthy, optimal lives for 3 to 4 hours of sleep. But that's generally 0.5% of the population. So you might be able to squeak by on 6 hours, but really you want 7 to 9. That's much more optimal. People who can squeeze by on less than that, very small percentage of the population. Actually, if you want to check out an article on the DEC2 gene, if you happen to be nerdy about the science, you can do that. Go to geneticlifehacks.com. There's a cool little short article there. Most people, though, 99.5% of people need 7 to 8 hours of sleep at a minimum for optimal energy levels. So, tips to optimize duration. So this is all practical, right? I know I'm doing a lot of sciencey sounding stuff, but here's the practicality of it. So you need to, number one, look at sleep as an important task, as important as eating, as important as work, as important as spending time with your family, right? And recreation. Sleep has got to be in the top 5, right? Can't be number 10, can't be number 20. It's got to be top 3 to 5 in terms of priority. So it's the processes that occur there are as vital as anything else you will do. So, number 2, choose a bedtime and stick to it. Number 3, you're going to want to go to bed early, especially if you work a lot and are trying to squeeze every minute out of the day. Number 4, best time to go to sleep to stay on top of your game is between 8 to 10 p.m. and to make sure you get like 8 to 9 hours in bed. So that means you can wake up at 4 or 5 or 6 a.m., depending on what your schedule is. That actually gives you 2 to 4 hours of uninterrupted time in the morning to work out, do focused, deep work, or spend time with your kids or family, whatever it is you need to do. So that's the main thing for sleep duration, is just prioritizing it. And then, I've got some other tips for how to improve the length of your sleep by way of optimizing sleep quality as well. But the main thing is, you got to prioritize it. You gotta pick the bedtime, and then you gotta pretty much try and go to bed as early as reasonable to do. Um, so if you want to sleep earlier, I guess this is number 4. Number 5, if you want to sleep earlier, move your bedtime back 20 to 30 minutes per night until you hit your target. So let's say you want to sleep at 9 p.m. I think more people would find that reasonable. I go to bed at like 8, but most people aren't going to do that. So let's say you go to bed at 11 or midnight and you want to go to bed at 9 p.m. So you can sleep longer and get up earlier. You start out at 11, you move back the next night to 10:40, then 10:20, then 10, and so on until you hit 9 p.m. So that'll probably take like a week and a half at the most. And makes it much easier than trying to go, let's say, cold turkey. Although, if you want to try it that way, you can do that too. Definitely, you can go ahead and just pull the, rip off the Band-Aid. So pretty much treat it like going to church. It's that important for optimal energy levels. And I know people don't necessarily think so. Everybody thinks they can squeeze by on like 5 hours of sleep, especially if they're busy or high-powered executive or entrepreneur. Like everybody's trying to max out their results and their productivity. But trust me, this is really going to help. And you're going to feel so much better if you're getting that 8 to 9 hours on a consistent basis. So that's sleep duration. So now I'm going to do sleep quality. Tips to optimize sleep quality. So number 1, no food 3 hours before bed to avoid wasting energy on digestion while sleeping. That can also interrupt the quality of your sleep, and you'll tend to be more likely to drift between sleep stages and wake up more often. So instead of, being in, let's say, light phase sleep and then going down into REM sleep for a good long period of time and then deep sleep for a good long period of time, you'll be in light sleep and then all of a sudden deep sleep and then REM sleep and then deep sleep. And then you suddenly come back up into REM sleep, into light sleep, and you kind of flick back and forth. So if you don't eat 3 hours before bed, it's going to help you sort of maintain more regular phases of your sleep. Number 2, switch, switch from bright lights or bluish, whitish light fixtures to red ones after sundown. And the reason for this is white and blue light frequencies, particularly blue, will actually interrupt or decrease your melatonin production, which is the hormone associated with sleep. So that's why, like, if you ever spent time in a brightly lit store that has like halogen lights, or in an office, they always have those really bright ceiling lights, and then you go home and try to go to bed, it's just not happening. So the reason for that is the blue frequency light from those light fixtures is sending signals through your eyes to your pineal gland. I think it's the pineal gland. Sending through your eyes to your brain, let's say. I think, yeah, it's the pineal gland. To your brain. And it's saying it's daylight outside right now. We don't want to sleep. So let's push down the melatonin production. Now, the way around this is, let's say when the sun goes down, you want to install red light fixtures somewhere in your room, or whatever space you're in, probably at home by that point. So maybe invest in some of those Hue light bulbs, the ones that can change color. Just set them to red. You can also get lights on Amazon that change color. It doesn't have to be infrared lights. It can be LED lights, those Hue light bulbs I was talking about, but just as long as it's red and not sort of white or blue color. So that way, let's say it's a bit more like you're telling your brain it's at least sundown rather than like broad daylight. So in that case, it's going to lessen the effect on the production of melatonin in your brain, and you'll be better off trying to go to sleep, and that'll improve your sleep quality. So 2 additional little tips under that. Um, in order to reduce the blue light frequency exposure, number one, I guess I forget what point I'm on, what number, but wear blue light blockers. So if you've seen that guy Day Asprey, he's constantly wearing blue light blockers. So they're like sort of these reddish, orangish, sunglasses, and those can help reduce blue frequency light exposure. So you might consider wearing those after sundown or at least like an hour before bed. Also, some people like to apply sort of blue light frequency filters, sort of like a plasticky, thin plastic filter that goes just like over their computer monitor, like this. Um, Again, also, computer monitors actually emit a good amount of blue light as well. So that's something you're going to want to mitigate, especially if you're working into the evening. Also, one thing I'm thinking of just now that I haven't written down, but you can get a software on your computer called Flux, I believe it's called Flux, and you can actually set it to automatically change the color tone or hue of your monitor after sundown. So it's going to change the color frequency and all of that, and make it much more on the red side. If you have like an iPhone and maybe an Android might do the same thing, but it's going to change it from sort of a blue bright color to more of like a red dull color to help with that melatonin production. It's pretty cool, actually. I think maybe people that some people that use the software maybe aren't even aware that that's the purpose, but um, there you go. So you guys can use Flux as well. Let me just pull up the website really quick because I feel like my monitor's been stuck on my notes, and I want to vary what you guys are looking at a little bit. So it's f.lux actually, or justgetflux.com. And so basically you can see here, download, and then you can see the light frequency by Kelvin and the circadian response. So this is your morning, and then daytime you want like blue and white light frequency, and then you kind of want to move to red. So this app will actually help you do that, and you can set your wake up time for the app, and it'll help adjust the color of the screen accordingly, including your bedtimes as well. So also, it looks like they have something here for the Philips Hue Lights. I'm going to click on this actually, just really quick, just to see. So, can you connect Hue Lights to Flux? You can. Oh, this is awesome. Okay, so I'm just finding this out, but so the Philips Hue Lights, you can, it says, use your mobile device to set up Hue, install Flux or Flux on Windows, and then you have an option in the application for options and smart lighting, and then you can control the Philips Hue Lights in accordance with your circadian rhythms that you set with Flux. So just really quick, I'm going to show you guys the Philips Hue Lights, and I'm sure everybody's seen this in like a store somewhere, but this is Amazon, and it's these lights. I'm gonna try and zoom in as much as I can. These guys, you can change the color, warm or cool. Here's some good examples, and so you can actually connect this with the Flux app. So it's about $200. All right, so back to the notes. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. I might actually go ahead and do that. And then the final point. So we covered for quality, no food before bed. Want to switch to red lights after sundown. Blue blockers are a bonus. Blue light filters to your computer are a bonus. And then you can get the Philips Hue Lights to pair with the Flux app. And then lastly, a few things. So next, ideally 30 to 60 minutes of wind down time with no screens or heavy reading to sort of decompress and get ready for sleep and get away from those blue lights. So that will actually help improve sleep latency as well, which is the time to falling asleep, as well as the sleep quality, time in deep and REM sleep. And then finally, 2 pointers. These ones are pretty much as old as time. You want to have a nice dark room. So, invest in some good blinds. Maybe get blackout blinds if your blinds are insufficient. And then make sure your room is cool too. So I would say cool to me is between like 68 and 72. That's good. That's Fahrenheit. And, but if you want to go lower, that'll work too. But just as long as it's cool in there, cool or cold. And then you can get under your blanket and have a nice body temperature. So that'll help with your sleep quality and sleep latency as well. So that's the sleep section. So, again, very simple: quality plus duration, good energy. That's what we want, right? So trust me, if you guys have not tried sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night on a consistent basis, you really need to give it a try. So very simple adjustments you can make. Same with the diet. It's just a matter of a couple habitual tweaks, and then you're off to the races. So, yeah. So the last section I wanted to cover today was actually hacking stimulants, or particularly caffeine use for optimal energy. So stimulants, optimal energy. So I'm coming up with the banners as I go along, so forgive me. I do love StreamYard though. This shit is awesome. Very cool. Okay, so uh, stimulants, namely caffeine-based stimulants. I included this because it's something that many busy people, entrepreneurs, rely on to push them through their mornings and their day, and they actually believe that this will improve their energy levels overall. But the reality is, you're actually doing yourself a disservice and crashing your energy levels, particularly by regularly consuming those stimulants, primarily caffeine. So, regular stimulants and caffeine will actually spike and crash your cortisol levels. And cortisol is actually considered the wakefulness hormone. So, you actually start out with, let's say, your cortisol level is going to be lowest in the evening when your melatonin is highest. So, there's kind of an inverse relationship there. And then as you're sleeping and getting ready to wake up in the morning, it's going to start to go the other direction. And that's your diurnal rhythm. So in the morning, your cortisol is going to be at its highest around the time you wake up and just slightly after that. So you have a natural rhythm with that already. And drinking lots of caffeine is actually going to lead to huge spikes in your cortisol. Since cortisol is the wakefulness hormone, it's also the stress hormone. So if you have excess cortisol levels going on, you're going to feel really tense. You're going to feel jittery. You're going to feel maybe a little nervous. And also getting less sleep can impact that as well. So if you ever slept a bit less, your cortisol levels are going to be higher than they otherwise would if you slept better. So like I said, regular daily habitual caffeine use or stimulants, it's going to lead to daily spikes and crashes in your cortisol levels. And over time, that's going to really impact your energy. So I pulled an example just real quick from a study here. And what was the study called? Just so you guys have reference. It's called Cortisol Responses to Mental Stress, Exercise, and Meals Following Caffeine Intake in Men and Women. 2006. I struggle with some of these journal names because they don't write them out in full, but Biochemical Behavior, let's say, is the name of the journal. So 2006. Now I've got I pulled the images here. So at the top we have women consuming caffeine, and then a comparison with a placebo group that did not consume caffeine around those activities. And then the two graphs at the bottom, same for men. So on the left, we have mental stress and cortisol peaks and crashes with and without caffeine. And on the right, same for exercise with and without caffeine. So let me see how far I can zoom in here. I might be pushing my luck. Hang on a second. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so the top one is for women. So mental stress for women. You can see the dashed line at the bottom. That's the placebo group, right? So they were introduced to some type of mental stress early on in the beginning here. And you can see this bottom line is the placebo group. So a very mild increase in cortisol here, and then sort of a steady decrease as as the stressor evaporates. And then you have your meal. The cortisol continues to go down throughout the day in a nice normal diurnal rhythm, right? Like it should. So should be highest in the morning, and then if you have a stressor, it might go up a bit, but then throughout the day it'll gradually decrease. Um, Now with the ladies, you can see the caffeine group at the top is the solid line, and you can see cortisol is pretty much steady at that point. But once the stress hits, you get a massive spike in cortisol, that stress hormone, much greater than, was it like two times, just under two times greater, um, 1.5 times greater, let's say, than the placebo group. So it goes all the way up here and remains much higher throughout the course of the day until the very end, where it kind of normalizes. But throughout the day with the caffeine, you get a huge spike with that stress. And then it continues to be higher than the placebo group throughout the day. So again, that's the stress hormone, right? So that's bad. And then the men, very similar. The men had actually higher levels of cortisol overall. But you can see here, we're introduced to stress. So you're at about 3 nanograms per milliliter. The stress hits, and then you spike up. The placebo group spikes up to about 5 nanograms per milliliter. And then again, big drop. They have their meal, and then things level out after their meal. Interestingly, actually, just looking at this, looks like the men's cortisol actually levels out much faster than the women's. I haven't done research on that, but that's an interesting sort of observation. But so there's your placebo group. You peak out at around 5 nanograms per milliliter, and then wind your way back down throughout the day. And then with the caffeine group, in the morning, you get to about 3.5 nanograms per milliliter. And then you go, with the stress happens, you go all the way up to 6.5 nanograms per milliliter. So again, with the stress, massive cortisol spike. And again, it's going to really, really dip and fall down. You have your meal, and then it kind of ticks up again and then levels out. So if you've ever drank a lot of caffeine, you'll be familiar with those kind of like jittery, tense feelings and emotions that happen. You drink like 3, 4, 5 cups of coffee, you're going to be on edge, you're going to be tense, and that's all that cortisol that's happening. So you can see with the addition of a stressor, it's going to jack up your cortisol significantly with men more than women. But again, like men sort of, at least in this study, have a much more pronounced peak of the cortisol, and then it levels off much more quickly. Versus the women, again, similar type of response to stress with caffeine, but it takes longer for things to level out throughout the course of the day. But the main point is much higher peak, right? And then again, with exercise, you see a similar pattern. I guess the stressor is here in the beginning. Actually, not too bad with the exercise, although, there is overall elevated cortisol levels, but with exercise, not so bad as like mental and physical, maybe like mental stress. So, but again, you see the caffeine line is elevated above the baseline of the placebo group. So, and the note here, saliva samples were collected from women and men on days where they were administered capsules containing 250 milligrams times 3 or placebo. That's a lot of caffeine, by the way. A cup of coffee might be like 80 to 100 milligrams. So that's a lot of caffeine. Okay, they're spread out throughout the day. So 250 milligrams at each of these arrows, and then underwent either mental stress or bicycle exercise before consuming a noon meal. So again, you guys can see here, the caffeine really increases the cortisol response, the stress response. And with that, you actually get a peak of energy like you experience with your coffee drinking, and then a crash, a come down, usually later in the day. But even so, even with that, the caffeine, you're going to actually be a lot more stressed and things like that throughout the day. So over time, that's actually going to lead to something a lot of people experience, which is burnout from the caffeine. And it's actually going to really affect your energy levels, and you'll actually have a reduced response to the caffeine over time. So you're going to need to drink more of it to get the same results. And that's called desensitization, or let's say a receptor internalization, if you want to get fancy about it. Basically, the receptors that those caffeine molecules would bind to, whatever the ligand is, they're going to internalize, because the body's like, okay, there's a lot of this substance here. We're going to reduce the number of places it can connect with, so that we don't have some type of reaction, or let's say cytotoxic or neurotoxic response, right? Maybe some other things too, like hormone production, like we need to ramp this down. This study, you can take a look at here, mean changes in cortisol for men and women. Bars labeled caffeine show a difference between placebo and caffeine over all time points starting at 60 minutes after first caffeine dose in the morning. Bars labeled mental stress, exercise, and meal indicates change in cortisol, preceding manipulation to immediately afterward. So let's take a look here, right? So with the caffeine ingestion, you can see there's an overall mean increase in cortisol on this side versus this side. And then again, with mental stress, cortisol, I mean, I guess that's a comparative thing, right? But you can see how mental stress and cortisol and caffeine combine for a huge cortisol spike. And then, so exercise doesn't produce that much more cortisol. Exercise plus meal, negligible. So I have to resist the urge to go on about all the science. I get really excited about it, and it's a lot of fun for me to read. But this was kind of a broad spectrum stream. So you can see here, clearly caffeine has an at least marginal effect on your cortisol levels, your energy, and there's a lot of peaks and valleys there, which you really need to be smart about. So now I'm going to give you my experience on how to hack, let's say, caffeine for optimal use to avoid those energy peaks and crashes and that desensitization you experience with caffeine. So this is me anecdotally. I'm sure there's probably some other evidence online or studies to back it up. But so to reduce adaptation to caffeine and keep optimal energy while still enjoying it, 1, limit consumption of caffeine to 2 to 3 days a week max. Number 2, don't use caffeine 3 days in a row. So try to keep it to 2 days in a row out of 2 to 3 days total week. And if you happen to love the taste of coffee the way I do, I love drinking coffee. I just love bitter things. So you can actually get a good decaf blend and keep drinking the coffee every day without the all the caffeine and the cortisol spikes that you're going to get. So I actually love a brand called Vitacup, and I mentioned this on Instagram, but I wanted to just briefly circle around and show you guys. There's some really cool things happening with coffee nowadays. A lot of companies are making these sort of smart coffees and adding in things like, like MCT oils, vitamins, nootropics, all different kinds of things, turmeric, etc. But there's this company called Vitacup, and you can get it at certain stores too. I've seen it in Target. I've seen it in Sprouts. It might be, no, I don't think it's the Trader Joe's, but so Vitacup, they have decaf options. So they have Genius Decaf and what's the other one? Vitamin Decaf. So Genius Decaf, right? Caffeine free, great taste. I can vouch for the taste. MCT oil for energy, turmeric, and B vitamins. And then they have vitamin decaf, which includes a bunch of different B vitamins, potassium, some vitamin D as well. And yeah, it's actually pretty damn good. So consider, if you want to taste the coffee every day, get a decaf and then save your caffeine, your actual caffeinated coffee for certain days during the week. I actually like to save my caffeine for the weekends because then I really feel like I'm going to hit the ground running, if you know what I mean. But you can also, like, if you want to do something, if you want to have a little fun during the week, you could also take one of your 3 days of caffeine and put it on like a Monday or a Wednesday. Just make sure you don't do like 3 days in a row, right? It's great to save it for Saturday and Sunday though, because it just it's kind of like a reward and it feels a little naughty. So anyway, so offsetting that consumption reduces increases sensitivity to the caffeine and enables you to get the max benefit from the caffeine without heavy crashes and reduced effectiveness. So again, you're noticing a theme here. Pretty much everything I'm telling you guys here today, it's all about getting a nice, even increase and then a steady decrease of energy throughout the day. We want to avoid, high glycemic carbohydrates and sugars for meals, and particularly breakfast. We want to make sure we're eating complex carbs and fats and proteins with our meals to bring down that glycemic load and get a nice, even release of glucose in the blood. For sleep, you want to get 7 to 9 hours. Let me change the banner here. Conclusion, right? I'm going to set these up ahead of the stream next time, so you guys don't have to watch me tweak it. But yeah, so, and then for sleep, 7 to 9 hours. And that's going to, again, give you a nice, restful sleep. Your body can restore, rebuild. Your cells can clean themselves and dispose of defective parts, things like that. Growth hormone, repair, memory storage and synthesis, etc. You're converting short-term into long-term memory. That's going to help you. And then with your stimulants, also you want to get a nice even release of cortisol. I guess it's not a curve in that sense. Cortisol, let's say this is the morning over here. Cortisol, you more want it to go like kind of like this throughout the day, and then there's kind of a dip, and then while you're sleeping throughout the night, it's gonna kind of slowly steep up. So maybe it's like this, like a wave, right? So you get that nice diurnal rhythm. It's like a very smooth roller coaster. So that was a pretty long stream. We went about an hour. Does anyone have any comments or questions or anything like that? If you don't have one right now, just drop one in the comments if you find this helpful. I know this was moderately in depth, but I tried to keep it broad. And these are things that every busy person can do to help optimize their energy levels throughout the week, get an easy 10 to 15% increase in productivity and energy, which you can apply towards your business goals, your financial goals, hitting targets, spending time with your family, getting up early, getting after it, hitting the gym, all of those things, right? So I will do streams. Since you guys can tell, I'm kind of a science nerd as well. I'll do streams kind of going more in depth on each of these topics, maybe cover a little bit more of the science. But I think this is a ton of value for busy entrepreneurs out there looking to optimize their energy levels and maximize their output and productivity. So, I mean, life is all about quality and quantity. Not everybody gets quality and not everybody gets quantity. But if you improve your quality, you're going to get more quantity as well. I hope that makes sense. But you can actually implement these things right now and get a major boost and consistency in your energy levels. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to hit me up. This is Josh at Rise Above Health. Happy to come to you guys today with a nice long live stream and cover what I believe to be the easiest fixes most entrepreneurs and business owners and executives can make to improve their energy levels, increase their day-to-day happiness, experience, and output. I'm on Instagram, Rise Above Health, YouTube, Rise Above Health, Twitter, Rise Above Josh, Facebook. Obviously, you guys are here with me, but if you're watching this on my personal page, make sure to join the Rise Above Health Biohacking and Optimization for Entrepreneurs group. There's going to be a lot more exclusive content there as we get more and more people into the group. So do check that out. I appreciate you guys joining today, and we got a lot more heat coming. So, I think that'll do it. All right, guys, take care. I'll see you soon, and be well. Peace out.